Okay, so we've now arrived at the primitive camp, and as implied by the name, this is a campsite that's maintained by the National Park Service, where they provided some tent sites. There's no running water and there's no toilet facilities to really speak of. Some bear boxes for safety. Basin Creek is off to my right hand, and we've come about 1.5 miles up the Grassy Gap Fire Road to arrive here at the primitive camp. And when we start the cabin virtual hike, the trailhead is right over here to my right, and we'll go up into the cove and show you some points of interest as we go, and ultimately arrive at Martin Caudill's cabin. This was, we believe, the focal point of the community. And we believe that for a couple reasons. This is where the 2 or 3 creeks come together. Cove Creek and comes down off of Brooks Knob, and then Basin Creek comes down this way, and then they join forces and become a very wide creek as it heads out towards Long Bottom, ultimately leading into the Roaring River. And the other thing that would lead us to believe that this was the focal point of the community is that right here to my left, just a few feet away, is what remains of the Primitive Baptist Church. So we'll head over that way and take a look at what remains. I'll have to open the door for you to get in, I guess. But there was at least one chimney here, and this was the community church right around the turn of the century. And you would walk right by this rock wall without knowing that it was a church. But here are the front steps. So I'll open the door for you and let you get in. We'll have to make sure we don't leave the door open. Don't want the flies to get in. And so this was, you can see this is this was the mantle stone over the firebox and what remains of the chimney. And it's hearsay, but what I was told is that this was not a log structure, that this was a board structure. So we can presume from that they maybe used the mill to make some boards. But this was an active church in the association. I know it was active right around 1900, and I haven't really gotten a lot of information about when it was formed or when it ended. I'm going to presume that by the time of the 1916 flood, things here had pretty much gone by the wayside. If we were to walk up this way, maybe about 1 mile, we would come to what is known as the Alexander cabin, and that was once a post office. And the Alexanders had a small, what they called general store, which I think was really more of just a shelf inside their house that had some commodities on it, and if you needed a little bit of this or a little bit of that, you could purchase it. But other than that, if you wanted to, quote, go to the store, you had to walk all the way back out to Long Bottom Road, and then hang a left and go another 2.5 miles up the road to Absher's. And that's where the closest community, closest other community was. So from Martin's cabin to Absher's was probably about 8 miles. So it's a good little distance in a very remote area. So this land here was probably it was about 75 acres of flat land, and so you can assume that this is where most of the crops were grown, just because it affords itself to that function. And then this land was actually originally granted to a fellow by the name of Jesse Alexander, and by the late 1800s, I'm sure Jesse had long passed away. But the Alexander family owned pretty much everything up this way, this property, and everything back down to Long Bottom. And that the Alexander family had lived in Wilkes for forever and ever. Mid 1700s is when they first started settling in the area. Okay, so now we're at the grave of Alice Caudill. Alice was my grandfather's first wife, and she was born in about 1901, and she passed away on July the 15th of 1916. Only marked grave here at the Basin Creek Primitive Baptist Church. And if there are other field stones here, we haven't found them. It seems rather curious that there would only be one grave, but this is the only grave that we've found. My grandfather always carried a journal where he kept track of everything that he expended, and all of his income and all of his expenses. It was really more of a ledger than a journal, but he records his marriage license to Alice and his marriage, which occurred in January of 1916. It was January the 16th of 1916, and then she passed away in July of 1916. And it's hearsay; it's not substantiated, but we were told that Alice was pregnant at the time when she passed away. So in July of 1916, what happened was an unusual series of events, and even though it was July and it's early for the hurricane season, there was a hurricane that came up from the Gulf of Mexico and basically followed the ridge lines of the Appalachian Mountains, and it dumped about 4 feet of water. That 4 foot of water number was what was recorded down in Asheville in the French Broad, when the French Broad busted out of its banks and flooded the entirety of the area right around the Biltmore. But that same storm came up this way and dumped about 4 foot of water, which had the effect of loosening all of the soil and basically just saturating everything. My grandfather and Alice were living up in the cove, and so subsequent to that, within a few weeks or a few days perhaps, a second hurricane came in off of the Atlantic and basically followed what was the North Carolina-South Carolina line, got to Asheville, hung a right, and followed the Appalachian Mountain line up again, dumped another 4 feet of water. And so as we were talking previously, a lot of the land had been clear cut for pastures and the like, and the net result was that there were great landslides where trees and mud was just washing off of the mountain, washing into Basin Cove, and just clearing everything in its path, just taking everything out as it came down the mountain. My grandfather at the time was up in Green Cove, Virginia. If you know where the Creeper Trail is, he was up there, and he was working for the railroad, loading railroad cars. And when the flood occurred, he came back down, and as he was returning, he made it as far as Holbrook Store, which is up near Abshers, when he learned that his wife Alice and her mom, whose name was Wadey Adams, and one of his younger brothers, Cornelius Caudill, had been killed in the flood. And so the story was that the three of them were in my grandfather's cabin, and Cornelius had begged his parents to be allowed to stay with Alice and her mom in the cabin, and so he was awarded that privilege, and the floods came through, and the three of them were killed. And so Alice's body was found downstream, 1.5 miles or 2, out towards Abshers again. Cornelius's body was found, and he's buried up in Abshers in a Caudill cemetery. And Wadey's body was never found. So that was the tragedy of the 1916 flood. And at that point in time, Martin sold all of his property. He had some land holdings, and he sold all of that property to his dad, Harrison. Harrison stayed in the cove until the time that he died in September of 1924. But Harrison was last to go. Everybody else kind of got out